Hey everyone, Guro Mike, Bayani Warrior Martial Arts, and it is episode 12 of the Bayani Warrior Podcast. And in this episode, it's going to be slightly different. Typically, I interview a guest that has a particular knowledge or skill set in a given area that I feel is beneficial to everyone out there in terms of their self-development, their self-protection strategies, and so forth. However, in this episode, it's just going to be me. This is going to be a solo episode. I'm simply going to talk about a topic that's been on my mind lately. And while I'm talking, I'm actually not only recording this on the computer, but I'm also filming this episode as well. So if you want to catch this on YouTube, you can. You can also catch this episode on iTunes on your way home from work today as well. Happy Friday, by the way. So today's episode is entitled The Filipino-American. Now, I entitled this episode The Filipino-American because in this episode, I want to talk about the 3 reasons why I believe all Filipino-Americans should study the Filipino martial arts. Now, in case you didn't know already, October is Filipino-American History Month. So this month means a lot to me as a Filipino-American, as well, especially as a Filipino-American who is passionate about bringing the Filipino martial arts to as many people as possible. And today's episode, I want to talk about the reason why I believe all Filipino-Americans should study Filipino martial arts and how it can help us, especially in this month of October, Filipino-American History Month, get in touch with our culture better as well as ourselves better. Okay, so the first reason why I believe that all Filipino-Americans should study the Filipino martial arts is that it connects you to a deeper side of your culture. And I know there's a lot of different ways we could do that. I remember as growing up, and if you're Filipino-American watching this, you probably can attest to this as well. Growing up in America as the child of Filipino immigrants, the Filipino culture was always this thing that was around us all the time, but also felt like it was still kind of distant. So if you were in a Filipino household like I was growing up with my 2 siblings, you probably heard Tagalog all the time. You probably ate the food. You probably smelled the food all the time. But past hearing the language and eating the food, the Filipino culture really wasn't present. I mean, you definitely didn't see any Filipinos on TV really growing up, and if they were probably playing some other race, which, you know, is a whole different episode altogether. You're always seeing Asian Americans, you know, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans on TV, especially in martial arts films, of course, back in the 80s and the 90s, but you didn't really see any Filipino Americans on screen. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to the Filipino culture. And if you're a Filipino American, you know what I'm talking about. Now, it's a little different now. We're seeing on TV that there is a lot more exposure, a lot more representation of Filipinos and Filipino Americans on television now and in movies now. But I think even beyond that, we as Filipino Americans need to get in touch with our roots, our Filipino roots, as well as our Filipino American roots. And for me, in my humble opinion, the best way to do that is to study the Filipino martial arts because it gives you an active participation in our culture. Again, back in the day, my idea of active Filipino participation in the culture was just eating lumpia at a Filipino party. That was probably the extent of my involvement in Filipino culture as a kid. But when I discovered the Filipino martial arts in my teens, I was just obsessed and in love with it, and I realized, wow, I have actually a root, and I actually have an ability to participate actively in something that my ancestors have been doing for thousands upon thousands of years, which is a very empowering thing. When you realize that, you know, you're training in something that warriors trained in to protect their lives, to protect their tribes and their families, if you connect it to something deeper like that, it's so much more empowering. Okay, and the second reason why I believe all Filipino Americans should study the Filipino martial arts is the fact that regardless if you're Filipino or not, and I think one of the things that Filipinos, especially Filipino Americans, tend to be a lot more passionate about now than, you know, they were, you know, several, you know, even decades ago. They seem to be much more open to promoting their culture outside the walls of the Filipino community. So, you know, back in the day, no one knew what, you know, the dessert halo-halo was. No one knew really what pancit was. But now, you know, you're seeing, you know, these BuzzFeed videos and these different videos online talking about Filipino food. I just saw a video on Facebook talking about Jollibee. I mean, you know, we're seeing more of a representation of the Filipino-American community in the mainstream now. But even more importantly than that, I think the Filipino martial arts can not only represent us well and bring us out to cultures who may not normally be exposed to our culture, but it gives them the opportunity as well to participate in our culture. And it's something that I feel anyone of any culture can appreciate simply because of the fact that all human beings want to feel safe. All of us want to feel safe. So it doesn't matter if you're black, white, Latino, Asian, whatever. If you want to feel safe, this art can help you do that. And I don't care, again, where you're from. All of us as human beings want to feel safer. We want to feel empowered. We want to feel more secure in our surroundings. And the Filipino martial arts are an excellent way of doing that because they are extraordinarily effective for self-protection, as most of you probably already know by now. Now, the third and final reason why I believe that all Filipino Americans should learn the Filipino martial arts is the fact that I believe it would make us as a Filipino American community stronger. Okay, and I know I might trigger, quote unquote, some people with what I'm about to say, but quite frankly, I am looking at the next generation of Filipino American youth coming up, and even many of my peers in the Filipino American community, not necessarily ones that I know, but people that I've come across in the last several years. And I just don't see the same level of strength and fortitude and resilience in this current Filipino-American community and era that I saw decades ago. And, seeing my parents coming to this country and seeing the other Filipino-American kids, the older ones, the kuyas in my community growing up in New Jersey, seeing how tough and strong those kids were. There was definitely a sense of fortitude and sense of toughness in the Filipino community back then. And I'm not really seeing that necessarily now. Now, I know, just as a kind of a disclaimer, I know there's always exceptions to this rule. I mean, I've met a lot of young, tough, resilient Filipino-American entrepreneurs, Filipino-American military veterans, law enforcement, active law enforcement officers. There are and of course martial artists, right? I've come across a great deal of them lately. But overall, it just seems that the overall sense of Filipino-American toughness is not as prevalent as it used to be. And I think that the Filipino martial arts are an excellent vehicle for not just teaching you how to protect yourself and connecting you to your culture, but it also develops a sense of fortitude. Why? Because when you have someone swinging a stick full speed at your head, you need to stay calm and focused and tough to deal with that threat, to solve that problem, right? If you are dealing with a guy coming at you with a knife, that takes a great deal of emotional and mental fortitude, okay? And if you can handle those things in training, going to work, having to pay that bill, having to deal with that parking ticket, all those things become so much easier to deal with when you train to be tougher, when you train to be more resilient, when you are surrounded by like-minded people who want to improve themselves, who want to be tougher, who want to be more skilled at being warriors. It's just a natural progression. You will become stronger after undergoing Filipino martial arts training, consistent Filipino martial arts training, and I would also say consistent, true, and realistic Filipino martial arts training, okay? So again, the Filipino martial arts, I believe, and this is just my personal belief, I believe everyone should learn it. But I think as a Filipino American, it definitely behooves us and it should motivate us to study the Filipino martial arts in the month of October, being that it's Filipino-American History Month. And I believe that not only will we be able to protect ourselves and be physically safer, especially in these dangerous times, where issues of vandalism and assault against people of all races is happening, but it also enables us to connect to something deeper. So a part of ourselves that we tend to forget in this world of smartphones and technology and all these things, it allows us to kind of take a break and focus on something primal, something pure, something organic that as Filipino Americans is within us. Okay, and I think it's very, very important that we try it out. So if you are a Filipino American watching this, and you've kind of been on the fence, maybe you have a friend who does Filipino martial arts, or maybe you've kind of seen some YouTube videos, hopefully ours, and you've been thinking, maybe I should get into that, maybe I should give that a shot. Give it a shot. Give it a few weeks. I guarantee you're not going to regret it. Either way, you're not going to regret it. We are right in the middle of Filipino-American History Month, and this would be a great time to train in the Filipino martial arts of Kali, Arnis, and Eskrima. Let's become Filipino martial Americans again. Let us be tougher. Let us be stronger. Let us be more capable, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. And let us go into this month with this art form that has enabled our people to survive and to dominate for generation upon generation. All right, guys, so that's it for episode 12 of the Bayani Warrior Podcast. This is actually day 13, I believe, day 13 of Filipino-American History Month. So take care, God bless, and remember to be the hero in your life.